I think you've said that you're not very good at being famous.
I'm not. It's hard. It's like I imagine it's like running for office or something. It's all body language and like you know, the subtlety, the angles. I don't know the angles.
The angles. I don't know the angles. Listen, I am a solar power defender, a melodrama obsessor, a pure heroine, purist. That doesn't even make sense, but I am all of those things. Hello, my name is Kate. I make music and I talk about things I love, and boy, oh boy, do I love Miss Lorde. I am so invested in the dynasty that is Lorde, and I am so for the multifaceted, holistic artist, which I feel that her career and how she chooses to lead it, not without resistance, embodies. There also seem to be some rumors that there's some new tunage in the works, which we'll talk about later, but I just felt like it would be a great time. Solar Power just hit its 2-year anniversary, so here we are. Now, first we got to take it back. I think most people, and unfortunately to this day, still kind of just pair Lorde with Royals, which was her huge single that blew up when she was quite a young teen. But in doing this little deep dive, I uncovered some things that I didn't even know, and I consider myself to be a pretty big Lorde fan. I knew she was in bands before, but one of the bands that she provided vocals to, and then they were masked, still has a full album up on Bandcamp, and that has been so cool as an artist to go back and listen to some of Ella's earliest works. There's also the band Escape, which I think is the one that we see all the cute little talent show clips.
Tom, Ella,
Sophie.
and I'm Madeline.
How did that work out for you guys?
Oh, good. I think we brought a bit more the energy, and the big stage it really makes a difference. So,
but I think it's important to remember that Lorde was signed at 12, I believe, and then the Love Club EP had Royals as a single, came many years later. So Lorde has been, at this point, even as a kid, working very hard to create something that she is proud of. At the time when Pure Heroine was released, I felt like a lot of the stuff on the radio was very maximalist, very party, let the good times roll, reckless, but let's dance while we're young sort of vibe. But it was a huge shock, I think, to everyone when Royals blew up, because it's a bunch of layered harmonies and it's a good little snap or two. I personally think, not that other artists hadn't done this in eras before, but I think Lorde marks a pretty big pivot in the sonic landscape of pop music of the 2000s. We were long overdue for this more minimal aesthetic, a return to more introspective, brooding lyrics, which Lorde does so well. I think I also have to credit Miss Lana Del Rey for this, but I think Lorde and Lana are very different in that Lana is very clearly, at least in the early days, attributed to a specific character, whereas I feel like Lorde is much more pen to paper, if that makes sense. But yeah, I mean, any way you look at it, like, this directly paved the way for artists like Billie Eilish, like Halsey, like Olivia Rodrigo. On a personal note, Pure Heroine quite literally changed my life as a listener and also just as an artist. It came out right at the time when I wrote my first song ever, and I was largely inspired by just seeing someone on the pop scene as a lead female representing themselves in a way that felt a bit more dark, weird. Weird is not the right way to say it, but just like, I guess, a little more alternative leaning. I was also Lorde's sense of fashion appealed much more to me than how I saw other pop stars represented during that time. It's one of the earliest albums I can remember that I bought for myself. And I remember liking a couple of singles, and then it was one of those works that grew on me. And then by a couple months after listening to it, I was obsessed with it. And I remember that being such a special experience. I remember Ribs really feeling like, it's actually my favorite song, but really encapsulating what the trials of girlhood and growing older felt like to me. And while I feel like this separation or perceived separation of Lorde and the rest of the pop scene was working to her advantage in a lot of ways, I do feel like it led to a lot of misunderstandings.
Just that wasn't even my fault. Because I like what she's doing. I
Exactly.
think she's badass, but yeah, they're all like, kill yourself.
But I think it's very admirable that you've been so graceful in that situation, because it's tempting nowadays to kind of deliberately start, social media beef with people.
I only wish goodwill on people. I just speak my mind a lot.
Are you going to have a sassy moment where you get naked and do a video where you're like, actually, I'm all grown up?
All grown up.
Are you going to go crazy is what I'm saying. Please
I
don't go crazy.
I think I'm good. I think I'm okay.
It seems like it.
I think because of the way that Lorde presented herself, both fashion-wise and also just revolving around very introspective, heavy at times lyrics, we forgot she was a teenager. She got a lot of backlash because she had said some comments about other artists or other artists' work very early on in her career. But, she was a teen. I think we all have a lot of opinions as teens. I know I did. I think I was a lot more outspoken about certain things without thinking about the nuances of what I was saying at that time. And I think that's normal. And she didn't have media training. In an interview, she said, I had never done media training. I felt like I probably should have, because then I could have identified some of that baiting in the beginning. Now I'm really good at it. But I think people don't realize how weird it is to go from being a teenager or just a human being who has opinions and freely discusses them with other people to having everything you say scrutinized and taken out of context. I mean, this is nothing new, right? It's a common theme we hear from all artists, but I suspect it's that sort of thing that you can't really understand until it happens to you. I also just think people were off put by how stark the way Lorde presented herself. I remember specifically with on the Pure Heroine tour, especially the way that she danced, which I still find so inspiring to this day. You will find me wiggling all over a stage with the goal to look like a goblin, but it very much freaked people out because it was so different. If there's one thing, even if you don't like her music, even if you don't really care for her personality, you cannot say that she does not stand up for herself and seem to do what she believes in to some degree. I also think we cannot forget about the 2017 VMA performance. At this performance, Lorde was fully sick, with the flu, instructed by her doctor not to sing. She asked the VMAs, hey, I can't sing. Can I not sing? And they said they declined. It makes sense, but it's kind of sad. We put artists in a position where they have to constantly compromise their health and physical well-being just to uphold ratings or whatever else it may be. But I remember it was amazing because Lorde came out on stage, did not sing a lick, but did the most joyous, genuine little dance to Homemade Dynamite. And people were really, really harsh. It's like you can't you can't win. We also have the Shush K, which we have to talk about. So if you don't know, there was one particular song off of Melodrama called Rider in the Dark. This is a very vulnerable, heart-wrenching song. It's very sparse arrangement-wise. I think, if I'm remembering correctly, it's like just a piano and a vocal at times, and it feels very intimate for this reason. And so at our live performances with this song, when people would try and sing along to this particular very vulnerable song, Lorde would say, I mean, I think her intentions were to have a different type of fan experience, and for one song in the show, create more of an intimate setting. So I'm definitely biased as an artist who tries to make my shows as much of an experience as possible. I never just want to be someone who just stands there and like is like la 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 la, because you know you can listen to the album at home. But I really like this random guy's take and accent.
What can I say, Night Fam? Sometimes people on the internet really need to...
I think it's just a clear example of her artistic vision and integrity not matching up with the expectations that aligned with her level of pop stardom. I think Lorde does a really good job of being self-aware that this single propelled her perhaps to a height that maybe she never intended to get to. One interview she said, she vowed again when relating to royals, "What a lost cause," she said. "Can you imagine? I'm under no illusion that was a moonshot." I think most artists strive to have their work heard or seen or recognized, but what happens when the scope of something goes far beyond the exposure that you were hoping for, or even the exposure that you felt like you can handle? With any artistic profession, there's a lot you have to resign control over. And I remember specifically at the Radio City show, Lorde made a point to say, you know, I'm here to perform as long as you'll have me. I think when she said that, it really struck me how aware she is of this career being so fickle. She received this was before she decided to turn away from social media, but she got some backlash in responding to a fan who said, "Do you think we will ever get another album, or should we just give up on you as an artist?" And then Lorde replied, "Give up on me if you want to. I'm an artist. I write a record when I have just enough special stories to tell. It's all me, every melody, every lyric, not some team who just starts the machine up every 18 months like clockwork. The record is written. We're in production stages now. I've worked like a dog for a year making this thing great for you guys." So there's a lot there, right? The fan to artist relationship, I think, will always be a weird one, but it's so clear that her authenticity is at her core, even if that means sacrificing marketability, even if that means slowing down or inconveniencing the label's timeline. I mean, hello, can you reach me? No, you can't. But there is a clear sense of, I know this is temporary to some degree. I'm going to try the best I can do to make records that I'm proud of, and the rest is out of my hands. And I think there is something so deeply beautiful and vulnerable and human about that. I think that's one of the most honest things she could do as an artist. But I can also understand from a fan's perspective, not hearing anything for 4 years can feel like a long time. The problem is that art is marketed as a consumable, but which, I mean, it is, but creating it could not be more non-linear. You can't like forward assembly line a good record, Or maybe you can, but I don't suppose that's how Lorde operates. Something that I think about all the time is that, you always hear people say, be so good they can't ignore you. But I do not think there could be anything more misleading, especially in such an oversaturated music market. I think that the music will not come and will not reach certain ears without the marketing. And it's been that way forever. Maybe it's definitely changed a lot in the past couple of decades because of social media. One of the old interviews I found, Lorde said, a couple of months ago, I was performing on Jimmy Fallon and doing heaps of press for my record. And someone said to me, if it's just about making music for you, why do you bother with any of this? I don't know anyone who would say that to a dude, but whatever. I was like, I actually really care about this record and I want people to hear it. But yeah, it's a weird thing to realize that you shouldn't be ashamed of wanting your stuff to do well. I find that incredibly relatable. I think most of the artists I know, business people I know, anybody who's passionate about something or has something vulnerable to share in any capacity constantly fights that. Oh, shouldn't the art be able to hold up on its own? Am I incredibly terrible for talking about this thing that I made? But I think it very much sums it up of like, no, if it's not talked about, no one's going to know about it. You can get to a point where you have diehard fans, which she does, that will take on some of that burden for you. But I think if she hadn't done all of the press that she did, or it wouldn't have developed fans to that level. Sometimes I get to go to music industry conferences where there's people Spotify, from YouTube, from other DSPs, from in the biz. And something that really jumped out at me, one of the marketers said that as the artist or as the team marketing the artist, your posts nowadays should be 80% personality or showcasing who you are as an artist, and 20% should be directly related to the music, which I found so interesting. I think it's kind of counterintuitive, but I guess it makes sense in a market where the music can't speak for itself because there's so much of it. I think more and more your art relies heavily upon your ability to communicate what's unique about you or what's unique about your brand, converting your personality into a brand, which is always like a weird thing, especially for very sensitive bulbs like artists. So as someone like Lorde, who's so outspoken about social media and press, I'm sure making that leap is especially challenging. When the internet does not appreciate your rebrand, let's talk about solar power. Yeah. So I will admit that when solar power came out, I was a bit surprised. I loved Melodrama even more, at least when it first came out. Maybe in retrospect, I'm not entirely sure, but it really spoke for me production-wise, lyrically, everything. And then we get this beachy, fun, very introspective, very personal, I think a lot less cryptic than her prior works. And I think like any good album over time, it grew on me. I mean, say what you will, but you cannot deny that listening to Solar Power while biking around the park is not a great experience. I think it was often critiqued for being very minimalistic and very sparse. But I do find that interesting because I feel like Pure Heroine was also pretty minimal, just in a darker direction. Solar Power felt much more light. I mean, there are some dark topics discussed, but I think it's a lot more relatable and grounded in a sense. And I think the levity is the point. I think it shows personal growth. And it was very clear to me that Lorde was making the record that made the most sense to her at the time, which is what I can only hope for the artists I love. We want our artists to be weird and push boundaries and only follow their instincts until they do it in a way that we don't agree with, right? Lorde said, I think I'm still giving something that's really digestible. Lorde added with a smirk, but it's my pleasure to confound. I'm down to be that for people. Around the solar power era, we also saw such a rejection of technology. I, again, love which is very ironic. But yes, I think it speaks very much to the challenges of building boundaries as a public persona, as someone whose publicness directly correlates with monetization and compensation for your work. Lorde said, I know enough to know that people in my position are symbols and archetypes, and where we meet people in the context of culture and current events is sort of outside our control. So I try not to fret too much. Her Twitter bio of how we spend our days is, of course, how we spend our lives.
Now, why would you say it's important for you to hibernate in between creating records?
Well, I just have to go and live my life so that I have stuff to write about.
Lorde makes a clear distinction between her music, the world around her music, which is necessary to get the music to be heard, and her actual day-to-day life. And I love this acknowledgement that artists and creatives and people in general are allowed to be multifaceted, holistic people. Because if that is true, that also means that all the people who are, you know, regular, not creative, like that, it doesn't even exist. It means that anyone who's anyone has a creative spark in them, has something to say that can be seen in other people. And it means that we don't have to be monolithic. Lorde said, I went back to living my life, she said of her recent hiatus, identifying as a hothouse flower, a delicate person and a massive introvert, drained after years plus promotion and touring for Melodrama. And it's hard for people to understand that. The question I've got a lot recently is, what have you been doing? I'm like, oh, no. This is a break from my real life. I come back and perform these duties because I believe in the album. Talk about nightmares from the camera flash. It is so comforting to see an artist draw out these unconventional boundaries because someone's got to pave a path that is healthier.
I have really put distance between myself and that, just sort of for my peace of mind, I guess. But I do think that there are times when I miss, that sort of communication with people, and I can see how people need that. That's the primary way that we are all communicated with, both by people we know and people we don't know. So I have been thinking about, ways to sort of do that without doing it. And every once in a while I'll just pop up and post a bunch of stuff on a story and then disappear again,
And the world goes crazy and Pitchfork writes about it.
Wow. Well, I've always been quite careful about that because I think it's a slippery slope. If you're getting energy or validation from that source, I think at some point you're going to be in trouble. I try to, and I don't think really anyone, no matter what I don't think anyone that's getting compliments on social media is like, you're not feeling that. You're not like, oh, I feel incredible because of this thing someone's just said about me. You're looking for the bad thing, and then you're like, that is me. I am that comment embodied.
He is sacrificing monetization and broad connection to some degree to take care of herself and to make sure that not her art, but the world around the art does not swallow herself whole. And I imagine that is not easy to do under the kind of pressure that she is in My last bit of Lorde Fest is I think she's underappreciated for reframing the intimacy between fans, music lovers, and just how we relate to our day-to-day lives. If you have ever been received a Lorde newsletter, which I highly recommend, you'll see that they are highly personal. They can be a bit verbose because she's a writer. And it feels like something special. It feels like these were crafted with care. I guess I'm being a little bit like, stars, wow, they can do other things. But I think that's the point. I think we forget that these are people trying to be people. The famed onion ring fan page that she had, fantastic. Also, Lorde went to Antarctica and wrote a whole book. There's a limited run of copies, and I would love to get my hands on one, but sadly it's not in the store anymore. On that trip, she said, I've been reminded of an obvious fact over and over, that witnessing the natural world is the most important reason to be alive, that well-being matters above all else. Being in Antarctica has clarified how deeply vulnerable, how in need of protection it is. But it took coming here for that knowledge to galvanize. And in coming here, I have also been a small part of its deterioration. How could people possibly be expected to protect a place like Antarctica without ever seeing it for themselves? Nuance, nuance, nuance. Obviously, she's talking about climate change, and that's very important. And I think she makes a lot of really great points around that. And I don't think she's drawing any specific parallels back to herself. But I just think that's such a perfect metaphor also for stardom and finding a full-time career as an artist must be. We all want to see the myth, the wonder, the glamour, all the things that we project on success in music or any other art form or any other business. But in doing so, there's this really weird exchange that can almost feel inhuman when not framed in the right context. Artists give and we take, and that will always be the exchange, but I appreciate how Lorde makes a stance to reevaluate what the bounds of that relationship are, even if that means sacrificing some of her security as an artist. She's a model of putting well-being first when there is so much pressure for you to not do that very thing.
I like to cook, and I like to be very available for my friends and family because I miss a lot of birthdays when I'm working. And I think people realize that about me now. I'm someone who has to go away and figure it out, and I'll be back, and I'll bring you a full universe, when I come back. But
if you are lucky enough to have enough resources to be happy and be fulfilled on your own terms, you should most absolutely do that. And I think it's a great form of rebellion. And I love the woman. I really do. I would love to get to the point where maybe I don't have to use social media as much to feel like I can connect with people, to draw back to my medium. And I know for sure there's a lot of other artists who feel that way too. So yes, let's let artists be multifaceted and have lives outside of music. Let's also let people who aren't in music or art or any other creative field, whatever, be creative and have passions, and just not segment people into tiny, tiny little boxes, because that is so lame. Yes, what's next? I don't know. I'm very excited to see what happens. She's been playing Silver Moon, which is an unreleased bop, at her show. So I'm hoping that means new music soon, but at the end of the day, Lorde's going to do what she wants to do. And that's what makes her so Great. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you later, and bye.